This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Prime Minister's Development Initiative for Northeast Region. The participants are Nitin Gokhale, political analyst, and KV Prasad, journalist.
The Union Cabinet has decided and approved a new scheme called the Prime Minister's Development Initiative for the Northeast Region, christened PM Divine. It has allocated something like 6,600 crores for the 4-year period starting 2022-23, that is the current financial year, up to the year 2025-26, which are identified as the 4 remaining years by the Finance Commission period. Nitin, if you've been looking at the kind of developments that are happening in the Northeast, particularly in the last few years, we see there is an accelerated progress, a focused attention. The whole idea is to remove the kind of alienation or feeling of being left out in the development project that is being going on in the country. So if I were to look at PM Divine in the larger context of the Northeast and development, what is your first impression?
Thank you first of all, for inviting me to this program. Northeast remains very close to my heart, having worked there for over 2 decades, nearly a quarter century. So I'm very happy that the government is continuing with its efforts to develop the Northeast. So I see this PM Divine scheme that has been announced on Wednesday as icing on the cake, because over the past decade or so almost, the focused attention on the Northeast, and particularly since the current government came to power, has meant that the old grievances of lack of development in the Northeast is being taken care of. A lot of gaps that were there that have been filled, infrastructure projects have been accelerated, social schemes have been implemented much more vigorously. And I think the other issue in the Northeast that has been taken care of is the insurgency, which has come down considerably, except for some pockets of violence and uncertainty. So the Northeast is now peaceful. So in that context, I think this scheme comes as a booster to whatever has happened in the past decade or so.
If I were to look at the 4 objectives that were outlined yesterday when the briefing happened, is that the fund infrastructure will converge in the spirit of the PM Gati Shakti. As all of us know, it's a scheme in which the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself oversees and discusses the speed at which the projects have to be implemented. If there are any bottlenecks, it's a multi-ministry meeting along with the state concerned. The whole idea is to plug the gaps and push forward the infrastructure development. The second objective is to support social development projects based on the needs of the Northeastern region, enable livelihoods for youth and women, and as Nitin, you also pointed out, to fill the development gaps in various sectors. Now, most important, as you already pointed out, is the fact that insurgency has been contained, which for many, many years had actually hampered development because much of the funds allocated to the states were left battling this scourge. So that has altered, as one would say, the dividend of peace coming.
Oh, indeed. In fact, because of control over insurgency or insurgency having been sort of eliminated in large parts of the Northeast, one positive fallout of that is the leakage of development funds would have come down, because insurgency was largely fueled by inflated pricing, inflated project costs. Some of the funds would be siphoned off. So when you contain insurgency or eliminate insurgency, then that leakage stops. And when the leakage stops, the utilization of the funds becomes much more effective in the Northeast. The projects get then completed and implemented in a time-bound manner. I think that is the positive fallout of containment of insurgency.
I think you made a very significant point, because the leakages, which were a perennial problem, especially as you said, partly because of the insurgency, is one area with a big sigh of relief for people. And obviously, the general public and the PM Divine itself, which was announced in the budget of 2022-23, I think one of the focus about basic infrastructure in primary health centers, comprehensive facilities in government and secondary schools. Now, these are very, very elementary things that every citizen is entitled to and expects from the state. So I think this is something we could throw a little light on.
Yes, indeed. The facilities for education and women empowerment, if you have to just take 2 sectors in the Northeast, was a little erratic, depending on which area you were looking at. The problem was that because of poor law and order situation in many parts of the Northeast, there were no schools. If there were schools, there were no teachers. People were not willing to stay on. Even some of the areas which the insurgents used to call as liberated areas then were bereft of people because insurgents ruled the routes there. So again, because of the focus on social sectors, both in terms of development as well as human resource development, I think education has got a boost of late. And one of the perennial problems in the Northeast, apart from two I mentioned earlier, was also the fact that there were too many dropouts at the level of class 9 and 10 in many states in the Northeast. So while you had the literacy rate very high in states like Mizoram or even Meghalaya and Nagaland, it did not really give the correct picture because people were getting literate, but they were not getting educated. They were dropping out in large numbers, large percentage in the stage of class 9 and 10. So therefore, even that would be taken care of now because of the focused attention on social sector as well as in the education sector.
Within one issue that, of course, somebody like you has spent 2 decades in that area, the difficulty of terrain, because while we talk of Northeast in general terms, so of the 8 states, the terrain is so different in each state. Some have hills running around, some have the natural barriers in terms of rivers. So when we talk of the infrastructure in terms of air connectivity, rail connectivity, road connectivity, and probably even water connectivity, all these are challenges which have to be met. And I think that's some area which, like I was reading about 28 projects in air connectivity, that could be the easier portion, but the difficult portion is the railways, right?
Oh, indeed. There was a time when we used to say that only 2 states in the Northeast are connected by the railways. But again, that has changed over the past 15 years or so, and particularly in the past 10 years, where even the remotest state like Mizoram and Tripura have been connected by railways. I was reading somewhere that the one single line to Manipur has also been commissioned, and of course the line into Arunachal Pradesh, which actually started way back in 1990, nominal connectivity to Arunachal Pradesh going up to Bhalukpung from Tejpur, has now got other railway lines which go in a circuitous manner on the north bank of the Brahmaputra. So therefore, railways again has accelerated the development there or the construction there. But as you mentioned, the natural barriers or the natural inclination there because of the heavy rains, long monsoon, and very young mountains precludes quick implementation of railway projects or even road projects. But again, because of a sustained effort by the state government, by the railways, by the center, I think many projects have taken off. There are now more bridges on the Brahmaputra than ever before. There are more railway lines, more trains going, Rajdhani Express and others going into the Northeast compared to what it was, say, even 30 years ago or even 15 years ago. So that, I think, is a very positive sign again as far as Northeast is concerned.
I think one of the biggest achievements of recent times was a direct train to Arunachal, to Nahalganj, right, which connects the national capital. So that's one area which I remember.
Absolutely.
But Nitin, some of us who stay in the cities probably don't take it for granted is power and telecom, which are two very essentials nowadays for growth and aspirational youth of this country. And post-COVID, everybody has realized telecom connectivity includes the broadband. And this is one, again, challenge, partly because of the terrain. Northeast was always said to be area where you had natural inclination to go for hydel, but that was an expensive proposition. So we still are working on those things. And if you look at the donor statistics, it does show a number of projects, including hydroelectric projects. But this, again, is something you can't comprehend when you're sitting away from the cities of, say, Arunachal or other places.
Oh, indeed. Power is one main shortfall that everybody faces in the Northeast. There are still places in Arunachal Pradesh which function only on diesel generator sets. I was there exactly 1 year ago to eastern Arunachal Pradesh, and I could see that some of these small settlements and towns and villages will have to depend on that. But again, hydel projects may not have taken off in the way that they were envisaged, but certainly some of the thermal projects and the grid that has been connected to Bhutan and the projects that have taken off has meant that the situation has improved. But telecom is still erratic. There are some places where there is no telephone connectivity. There are no roads, in fact, in eastern Arunachal Pradesh, for instance, to places like Vijayanagar and Gandhigram and beyond Miao. So there is that problem, which I'm sure the PM Divine scheme, which now has been announced, would look at those gaps and those shortcomings that are there in the infrastructure building in the Northeast and take care of whatever shortfalls that there are in terms of implementation through this scheme. I'm very confident about that.
In fact, Nitin, as we talk of the connections through roads and railways and other areas. I think one of the whole focus also is on to develop infrastructure to connect to neighboring countries. And I think one of the innovative solutions, if I look at in the telecom while we're talking, is the hiring of a 10 Gbps international bandwidth for internet connectivity to Agartala from Bangladesh. Now that's interesting because that in northeast states it will cover about 1,200 villages. Also a possibility which is being explored for the benefit of people.
Oh, in fact, that is very positive development because integration of Bangladesh with northeastern states would be a win-win situation for everyone. So this is one example. So the other example is about the power grid connectivity between the northeastern region and Bangladesh, or power drawn from Bhutan going to Bangladesh via the northeast is another project which is viable. And if you're talking about just connectivity, I think now the waterway of the Brahmaputra, which connects West Bengal via Bangladesh, is being used. Chittagong port, if you have large size cargo disembarked at Chittagong, can come to Numaligarh refinery in the northeast via the Brahmaputra, which used to be a norm pre-independence or pre-partition, has been revived. So in a way, many projects are now looking east and acting east in many ways. So northeast, I call northeast the bridge to east as far as the countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, and then beyond Singapore and Thailand are concerned. So if we can fix northeast, I think our Act East policy of the Government of India would be then completely implemented.
One area which obviously is very focus of this government in particular has been to develop the Northeast as a hub for international and national tourism. There are very pristine locations, unexplored or probably explored to lesser extent. So somebody like you who has spent a lot of time in these regions, what is your larger impression? And also the fact that some of the concerns that have been coming up in terms of the environmental issues. So how do you balance these?
Well, environmental issues can be controlled, and the flow of tourists, when they become unmanageable or become large in numbers, one can see it. One has to go there and make sure that not too many people go and spoil the environment. But you're right, tourism is largely untapped potential of the Northeast. There are not just natural beauty that attracts people to the Northeast, but there are historic places. There is the Battle of Saraighat, which happened in Guwahati between the Mughals and the Ahom kings. There is the Kaziranga National Park, which is the only natural habitat to have the 5 big animals in one place. The rhino, the tiger, the elephant, deer and the buffalo, which is a unique place. There is the Manas Tiger Reserve, there is Namdapha in Arunachal Pradesh, and there is the peaks, the Himalayan peaks in Arunachal Pradesh, which are unexplored. Some Himalayan cities or towns like Tawang and Walong and Kibitu, one can go there. And I think the restricted area permits have now been eased, even for foreigners. And there is the Brahmaputra. There is a cruise on the Brahmaputra, which a lot of Britishers who want to come and spend 7-8 days there, combining it with a round of golf in the tea gardens, a number of tea gardens that are spread all over the Northeast, but particularly in Assam. Then there are these heritage bungalows, which the tea garden owners own. So there is a huge scope for tourism, not just for international travelers, but also for Indians to whom Northeast still remains unexplored exotic place. And I would urge Indians now to take advantage of the connectivity, because there are now direct flights from Bangalore and Mumbai, and Delhi, of course, has the best connectivity to the Northeast. So it's an area that remains completely unexplored. So that's the place to go to complete the full circuit of the country itself.
Yeah, I'm sure, Nitin, in days to come, with the kind of focus attention the government has been making in this northeastern region for all the 8 states, the pace of development is going to pick up, and the national integration that we're looking at and integration of the northeast into the mainstream of India will be accelerated as we go along. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure is all mine.
You were listening to a discussion on Prime Minister's Development Initiative for Northeast Region. The participants were Nitin Gokhale, political analyst, and KB Prasad, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.